Welcome back to Touring Backroads France. Today I want to take you to some Templar sites in this first volume. There are so many sites in France and around Europe, even into the Middle East, but in this part of France it's sort of an interesting place to look at some of these old Templar sites that are still here and well preserved. Today we're going to look at three. Malleyrand, which is for Saint John the Baptist of Malleyrand. This is in a village called Yvrac-et-Malleyrand, just outside of La Rochefoucauld. Another is in the forest of the Boixe, which we have already visited in a previous video. This is a location very near there in Maine-de-Boixe, in some of the ruins of the commandery there. And then finally a church in Coulonges, which is a little village near the forest and also near the abbey in Saint-Amand-de-Boixe. So these three places will be on our list today. I'll go into some more details on the history. If you have questions or things you'd like to look into more on this subject, leave a comment in the comments section. I'll try and put some links in the description. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and let's go together now to explore some of these sites and learn a little bit more about Templar history.
First of all, some important background information on the Templars, as well as today's trivia question. In this episode, we'll start off with something easy. In what year was the Knights Templar abolished in Europe? Stick around until the end of the episode, and if you haven't figured it out by then, I will give you the answer. A subject of speculation and intense study, the Knights Templar represents a period of European history that draws many parallels to today's world. The modern myths and legends surrounding the Holy Grail, lost treasure, and secret societies find their roots in the factual elements about the Knights Templar. What's important is to separate what we do know from what we do not. If you're interested in getting a general overview of the subject, a lot of good resources are available. I'd suggest starting with an interview called The True History of the Knights Templar with Dan Jones on the highly recommended channel History Hit. I'll put a link in the description below. From the time of the Crusades until the reign of King Philip IV of France, the Templars quickly rose to a powerful position in international trade. Reputed as formidable warriors, devout Christians, and astute financiers, they managed to forge an impressive position of power both in silver coinage and land holdings, while quickly creating many enemies both in monarchies and the church. While the subject of their disappearance has given rise to many legends about lost treasure, what is certain is that they oversaw a considerable number of commanderies, including several dozen in the Charente region, before they disappeared from the landscape. Some of these holdings are still in use, passed down to the Order of the Hospital, the Sacred Order of Jerusalem, or later the Catholic Church. Other sites were abandoned but are still visible today. Let's take a look at some of the sites in Northern Charente, in a radius of approximately 20 miles to the north of Angoulême.
So I'm here in front of the Templar church in Yvrac-et-Malleyrand. This is one of two in Charente that is actually a historical monument, and it was placed on the historical registry in 1994, although some records indicate other historical designations as early as 1870. This chapel is more of a defensive structure. It dates from the 12th century, and it was used up until the time of the disappearance of the Templars in 1312. The reason I decided to come here today is because it's a place that's really on the back roads. You wouldn't find this signpost on the main highway, and you would sort of have to know it's here. It's in an absolutely beautiful setting. Trees here, the surroundings on a nice summer day are just fabulous. You can stop here and have a picnic too. It's a really nice backroads location. You're out in the country here, so there aren't any surrounding buildings. Everything around here is pretty much open countryside. So on a bike route or by car, very accessible. Closest town is La Rochefoucauld, which is about 8 miles down the road. So this has got some interesting details in the structure. As we take a look here, you can see the front facade, and this is built at a time when Roman church architecture was really common. So it's built sort of somewhat as a church and somewhat as a fortress. The walls are very, very thick, and it's interesting to note that this building has been here approximately 1,000 years in this state. The roofing part, the structure on top, was actually replaced in 1980 by a new roof, and we'll see some of that as we walk inside the different structures. But it's definitely an interesting place to stop and see some of the local Templar history. This was all along the road from Paris in the north to Spain in the south, and the reason that the Templars had such a strong presence in this area is because of the crossroads between the ports of La Rochelle and Bordeaux, where obviously the maritime commerce and travel outside of this part of Western Europe was quite important, and what gave birth to the Templar legends, such as the Curse of Oak Island or the treasures that were brought to Scotland or possibly Portugal. And again, that gets into a part of Templar history that no one is 100% certain about. But what we do know are the dates and the actors involved in the actual Templar history, which went from the time of the Crusades to the time of the 100 Years' War. And during those times, the Templars were basically the bankers of Europe, working with kings, monarchies, the Pope, the Church, and in ways that are more or less clear depending on the historical sources that we use. So it is interesting to look into that and see that this area, the Charente region, was at a crossroads between the Western European ports, Dôme in Dordogne, which is where a lot of the Templars ended up being prisoner in the 14th century, and then the north-south route between Paris and Spain, where the Templars set up a lot of different commandery posts in order to protect the trade route and ascertain their control over the different economic aspects of the area. So another Templar site we're going to look at today is the Maison de Maine-de-Boixe, Maison Templière de Maine-de-Boixe, which is the Knights Templars residence at the north of the forest of the Boixe. The ruins of the commandery that we saw previously near Saint-Amand-de-Boixe are just on the opposite side of the current day forested area. It's about 3 miles from here, maybe a bit less. So it's actually just through the forest south. And what you see here are the remains of the House of the Templars in Maine-de-Boixe, which was just a bit further north. The reason that there was a distinction between the Abbey and Saint-Amand-de-Boixe and here was that there was a conflict between the parish holdings in the 13th century. So the Templars did locate themselves here to try and distance themselves from the Abbey in Saint-Amand-de-Boixe, which again is just south of here at the other end of the forest. The forest was quite a bit larger. At the time it covered a distance going from Dordogne all the way up into current-day Charente-Maritime. So all of this part of France was sort of blocked off by a line of forest and woods that kind of kept a natural defense along with the hilly terrain. So this is an interesting vestige here of all the remains. You can see clearly the front is still well intact. There was a chapel here. There are some areas in the back that you can sort of explore through. This is definitely off the main road. You have to look for the signs and sort of geolocalize this place to really find out how to get here. You can't get here by car. You're going to have to park and walk. I'm standing at the site of the church in Coulonges, which is a Templar church that was originally constructed in 1120. It predates the site in Maine-de-Boixe by a certain amount of time. The commandery was located in Maine-de-Boixe at the north of the forest. So this church is located about 5 miles outside of Saint-Amand-de-Boixe, which we know has an important abbey. So this church was actually built on a property that the abbey owned starting in the year 1070. And we know that this church was completed in 1120 and then appears in some tax records from the year 1170, which in particular talk about the dîme, which is also the origin of the American word dime, which is 10% of a total that was paid in relation to the Templars' control of property at the time. So we do know some about the history of this church. It's still an active church. On the door here we see that the masses are still given on Saturdays and Sundays. So it is still part of the parish of Maine, which is right next to Maine-de-Boixe in this area of Charente. So it's an interesting site. The roof actually caved in 1865. It was rebuilt with some lighter materials since it didn't resist that original test of time. And we know that the church was given to the parish of Angoulême in the year 1700. So you actually can't go in this church to visit. It's closed to the public except during times of worship. The other sites are accessible, but this one does remain an active site, so it's not always open to the public. There's a nice garden plot here. It's currently maintained. And then there are others, this one for example as well, which is really nice. Different crops have tomatoes and green beans primarily. And then you see the cistern up here, the water tank that you can bring down to the water pump and fill up. So all that is part of your community benefits, your property rights here. Obviously some of the plots are not maintained. This one is pretty overgrown, and I'm guessing some of these belong to properties that are no longer occupied or currently for sale. So it really does require a lot of work and maintenance to maintain these, but some of them are very nice. This is really typical in southern France. I have properties that have gardens that are included with them off-site, and this goes back to that tradition of sort of medieval villages, Middle Ages, where property rights were determined not necessarily by proximity or allotment on a square or grid pattern, but basically by the property's value in terms of position and location. So here obviously we're down by the stream. Down in the lower part wouldn't be ideal for building buildings, so they were built up more towards the church. And then down here, of course, we have the growing areas, and they were linked together under one name, one landowner, and that's how the properties were determined at the time.
To conclude this first episode about the Templars in France, if you listen carefully, you certainly caught the date that the Knights Templar was abolished in 1312. This was following the persecution by King Philip IV of France, who brought up a list of charges against the Templars, of whom many were imprisoned, tortured, and executed as a result. Many others fled to different countries in Europe, giving rise to the legends of lost Templar treasure. In upcoming episodes, I'll continue to scout out Templar sites, including the city of La Rochelle, as well as notable places in Charente and Dordogne. In the meantime, if you're interested in the topic, check out the many available resources that I'll include in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated.